What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki. Today we'll be doing My Hero Academia Chapter 307 review. Also, gonna real quick give my thoughts on the movie trailer that came out recently. I'd already kind of talked about my thoughts on the bioluminescent baby potentially being a religious figure, and the video I released just recently about how Overhaul was right, My History Academia too. So I'm just gonna say that I think this kind of confirms my suspicions that a lot of people would have gathered around the baby, and thus quirks would be a disease that was spread first off the backs of mice onto a baby. Baby comes into contact with a bunch of worshippers, the disease spreads, and from there, that's how you get quirks all around the world. Basically, it's a pandemic. That's my personal stance on quirks and what that baby's all about. And so I'm sure that this organization will have some kind of bioweapon that they'll release that will impact quirks in some way, whether by removing them or destroying them, or whether it'll be like a trigger spree, like during the Vigilantes with the Naruhata run, and those kinds of things. We'll see what happens, but I'm expecting this to be heavily quirk focused, deep lore stuff, maybe give us some backstories that aren't necessarily going to fit into the manga in a timely fashion, give us a little extra lore to work with. So yeah. As for today's chapter, starts off with them talking about Jailbreaker and how, he showed up recently, and it's Shindo who gets brought back into the story along with his girlfriend, Tatami Nakagame, aka Turtleneck. If you don't remember, she's the one whose body can retract within itself, so she's got like a telescopic body. And Shindo's quirk is basically that he makes shockwaves, vibrations. So, we finally see more of what, if you've been following the channel for a while now, we've been talking about how people are losing faith in heroes, they're going to want to handle things themselves, and we finally get to see students actually trying to interact with people, trying to get them to come with them to leave these hotspots, these areas that they know are going to be having more villain incidents within them. And they're just like, nah, we're good. We've been protecting ourselves. And you can even see based on the gear they have that they've taken some damage, that they have been fighting. They've been actively protecting themselves. And, they do have some reserves. But the reality is that they only have so much stuff before they're going to have to venture out, and they're not going to be able to stay holed up. Whereas if they at least are with the heroes, they'll have supply lines in theory that will allow them to have access to food, even if it's not as much food as they would like, but still have access to consistent streams of supplies as long as heroes are protecting you, making sure that cargo can be moved back and forth, etc. So but to that same notion, they kind of address an issue that I brought up as soon as these shelters came up on the Church of MHA streams, where we were discussing how while having a safe place does make it easier to protect everyone because you know exactly where everybody is and you can consolidate your forces, it does mean that if your opponent has a high enough value asset that can attack your area, that's just a high number of casualties that's essentially guaranteed by being in a consolidated area. And with somebody like Muscular rampaging in the area around Ketsubutsu, I would say it's only a matter of time before this campus falls, depending on what's with Muscular. They kind of mentioned that Jailbreaker was accompanied with some other Nomu, and if that's the case, then it's looking like there's a good chance that Ketsubutsu's falling, or at the very least, we're getting Deku fighting at the grounds of Ketsubutsu. I expect Shiketsu to fall as well, so we could be starting this arc off with at least Ketsubutsu and then Shiketsu falling back to back, us losing two of the three schools that we've really focused on, with UA being where the final stand is made. That might be the direction the story's heading. I'm kind of excited if that's the case. It doesn't look like things are going to be getting easier, especially with the fact that when they are absolutely refused help, it's far too late for them to get away, and Muscular appears. And that's who they've been essentially codenaming as Jailbreaker. And Shindo attempts to 1v1 him. He pulls out the blade. He's trying to, his best to stand his ground. Sends the girl to back to get them evacuated because he knows that they are not ready or on the level that they need to be at to be trying to tackle or tango with Muscular, as he is just a extremely high tier threat. So with that in mind, he goes ahead, tries to get him. He knows he can't beat him. I genuinely believe that Shindo knew he could not beat this man. But in turn, he knew he still needed to buy time, operating as a real hero, even with the fact that he was frustrated with them, frustrated with their refusal, knowing that if they had just listened to him, maybe they would have been able to get out faster and they wouldn't have to deal with this fight now. We see that Muscular hasn't even replaced his eye yet, so he's just kind of been out of jail and just wilding for the past couple of days, just running around. And I'm pretty sure the reason why he's named Jailbreaker is because while we've heard of those 7 jailbreaks, more than likely he's been going to several prisons since then, because that was just the first night. If they're going to code name him Jailbreaker, I'm assuming he's been at multiple prisons even since then that let them really confirm in their minds that it was him that was leading the charge. I don't think they would just give it to him off that 7 nights when those 7 prisons in one night, knowing that Shigaraki was on the run and that all these Nobu were involved earlier. So they have to have more reason for that. So yes, they've been actively doing it. So those 10,000 prisoners that we heard of, the number is likely gone up. And unfortunately for Shindo, physics applies here, and so the trying to vibrate his way through muscly slabs of armor, where he straight up says he has like 12,000 layers of muscle fiber to protect him, just doesn't work. If Shindo had managed to make contact with Muscular's actual jaw, like any of his bones, then he likely would have sent a shockwave through that would have rattled his entire skeleton. That would have been able to cause massive damage. But having to go through the meat layers, it doesn't matter. There's just too much force dissipation as it tries to reach into his deeper levels of his body. With especially once Muscular reveals that he effectively has a hellhound form. I don't know what Horikoshi decided Muscular needed this for, but he went ahead and gave it to him. I was really about to put Shindo in the ground, and then we get to the part that I find the most interesting, and it's a fun part to talk about now, because it completely kills the Chrysler building theory. Deku's still in Japan. It just happens to be a building with gargoyles in Japan. But 2, I believe this confirms that Deku has unlocked the 6th user's quirk. And specifically, I think that he's unlocked a smoke, basically the equivalent of the smoke fruit, or the plume fruit from One Piece. The reason for this is that when I looked closer into the panel where Deku was smashing as he crashes into Muscular, you don't actually see a physical Deku, and it's rare when Horikoshi just draws an impact line and doesn't have Deku at least actually visible in some capacity on the panel. Like when Deku had the high speed attacks from Black Whip during Joy Training Arc, even when he was getting pulled at high speeds towards Monoma, you could see him at least somewhere on the panel. Deku was completely gone, but there is this interesting nebulous spot there, just this impact that's kind of misty. And then from here, as he's flying away, you can notice that there's a spiral in the smoke clouds. And it's, it's this, it's got the little effect on it, and the smoke is spinning. And then you see Deku's holding up Shindo, but then you can see that there's still smoke coming off of his ankle, coming off of the sides of his face. And I'm kind of curious, and I love to believe and speculate that there's a possibility that Deku is now a smoke man. And this would kind of make sense if you remember that Bakugo said none of the quirks were especially great. Being able to turn your body into smoke and move around and be a smoke man, it makes you really evasive, but it doesn't necessarily up his fighting power. It didn't necessarily make him more dangerous. In fact, as long as he had a high enough movement speed available, then whatever he's dodging with the smoke fruit or the smoke ability, he could have still dodged likely with his physicality with just full cowling. So it doesn't do a whole lot besides add an extra ability of intangibility or invulnerability so he can make more interesting maneuvers. What I find fascinating about this is that if this is the case, then that means that there's a chance that we've gotten the 2nd and 3rd user's quirks, and that might have something to do with the coloration of Deku's eyes. If Deku does have this quirk that allows him to become more smoke-like, it would also kind of be a nod to the fact that Horikoshi, way back in the day, got one of his drawings published in a One Piece volume, and the character he had drawn was, in fact, Smoker. So I think there's a certain reverence going on here where he's giving an homage, and there's a certain level of My Hero Academia contains basically all of Horikoshi's hopes and the things that make him the artist that he is. He brought back characters from his Zoo manga. He brought back like his styles and vibes from his previous manga in Barrage, and now it could be just him, recognizing, one of his start points being that he got that early drawing published in a One Piece volume of Smoker, and that comes in, and that gets to be N, whose name means smoke, and then that's where he gets the sixth user's quirk from. I think this allows for a lot of interesting mix-ups, though, because if you get the Smoker fighting style, then you've kind of got these more like jettison blows, and he might not necessarily need to be using gloves anymore for that, because he can just like shoot like smoke bullets or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of potential here. I'm leaning very towards this. I'm really hoping that this is what's going on here, and it's not pure aesthetic, but it seemed to be drawn very deliberately. The way the smoke was swirling around him, then it's like a reveal coming off of his face. It could just be vibes, but Muscular is excited. He remembers Deku. This is going to be the rematch. I had been talking about how for Deku to be like a person with a rogues gallery versus a guy with a bunch of villains, he got to have these rematches come up. This could be a lot of fun, seeing Deku just finally get to go all out versus Muscular without blowing his body out, and in turn also having a fight where Muscular gets to go like pretty decently out, though it's going to be a lot harder for him to just damage Deku due to the fact that Deku is going to possibly have this smoke quirk. So I think there's going to be the potential of he's going to have to be tangible whenever he wants to do damage, and that's going to have to be how Muscular plays around that. We can get a fight where they both actually land blows on each other. We can see how this plays out. There's not a whole lot to discuss outside of these, few speculations that I had, but I just wanted to kind of address, because, a lot of this was stuff that, if you've been following the channel for a while, we've been talking about. We knew that we were going to have civilians pressing against, fighting back, not wanting to deal with the heroes anymore. So there's just paying dividends on what's been set up throughout the story. People have been disgruntled and upset since we saw them in the Genius Mobile, when there was about like a 50% approval rating in the audience. So we're just kind of getting all the payoff of what's been set up so far. And what I kind of want to really just say is that a lot of ways the Heroes vs. the Paranormal Liberation War arc was seen as the war, the beginning and end of a war. And instead, what that arc is just simply the first day of a war between good and evil, against heroes and villains, and the fight for control of society and what the world is going to be like. Because now, with so many heroes having fled, having retired, villains are running the streets, there's anarchy all over the place. They were concerned about whether or not they would even get to have cell phone towers for much longer. They're surprised that they get to keep the communication up. Mostly likely this is just because the villains want to be able to call each other too. So, they're sitting in this situation where they're worried about losing communication. They know that at any moment their people can be just murdered senselessly, and they want to try to get them in to safe haven so that they can just border down and really be safe. But they know that at any moment there's villain attacks coming. And when you have people like Muscular running around, these high tier threats, you got to be glad that Deku's out here on the streets. But at the same time, you got to wonder about who else is out there. What's Moonfish up to? What are any of these villains? Maybe like if Rapper was let loose, who's he out there attacking? What's he trying to get into? Is Overhaul out here potentially getting new arms or something like that, like for bionic implants? What is going on out here? Because if we're thinking of people talking about them being like his own little Sinister Six, and if you got the Rhino and Muscular, then maybe you got Doc Ock and Overhaul. He's going to get those implants, and we've already seen him have the multiple arms in the Ashura form. So who knows? There's just a lot that we have on the table right now, and I just want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys have been thinking about the chapter, if you've been enjoying it, if you're excited, what you think Deku got out of the second and third conversation, because the way he spoke at the end of the chapter was, no wonder my gift from the fourth wouldn't shut up. So it seems like he's not exactly happy with how much his head's been going off lately, but he's also been having to deal with a bunch of crime left and right. I don't think Deku's been getting to sleep like that. So we've got a sleepy Deku, which kind of parallels during My Villain Academia when Shigaraki was going through, and he was like, whenever I've been up this long, and he had been up for about 50 hours, he was unstable and he started hallucinating. So we might be seeing some of that from Deku's perspective. This fight, we might be seeing some hallucinations, some executions on his powers, some extra harsh behaviors. I think we're about to see the worst of Deku start to become unleashed while still keeping his body safe. meaning it will be the cruelest version to Deku of Deku to date. Um, I'm just, like I said, I'm pumped. Let me know what you guys think. I've got more than likely going to be releasing a UA Trader Theory video by the end of this week, and I should be doing a review of the anime episodes. So, hope to see you guys next Sunday for the Church of MHA. Hope to see you guys when I release the next piece of content. That's all I got to say for today. Anaki out. Hope you guys enjoyed yourself. See ya.